Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Every week I talk to teachers who want to leave the classroom but don't know what to do next. Many of them still have a passion for teaching. So I'm delighted to have ex-teacher Kahila Sivas as a podcast sponsor. Kahila has created a unique private practice as an online math and learning success coach, which has given her the freedom to follow her passion to teach and to make an impact. Now Kahila runs a business where she trains other teachers who want to escape the classroom. This is for teachers of any subject and any level who want to build a business while they're still working so they can confidently transition out of the classroom. Her mission is to help teachers to escape the classroom, create the income they deserve, find their inner balance, and make a huge impact in the lives of their students. Kahila runs regular webinars to explain her method and training programs. Check out her website at www.mathcodes, that's mathcodes.com/webinar, or email Kahila at kahila@mathcodes.com to get more information and set yourself up for success. Episode 20. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm really pleased to be interviewing Kerryn Powell, former teacher and now connection strategist, network catalyst and founder of Your Time Matters. Thanks for coming on the show today, Kerryn.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, that's great. So, Kerryn, you were a teacher. Tell us how you got into teaching and what kind of role you had in education.
Sure. I've had a mixed journey, and from being a child, I always wanted to be a teacher. And it wasn't actually until I was a mature age student, I started teaching my teaching course when I was 27. Because of family issues, I didn't go straight into teaching. I went into the travel industry. But I always had that burning desire that I was wanting to teach. And when you look back on things, you see what happens in your life to give you the journey that you're on. So my first position was at Spotswood Primary School after I went through Toorak Teachers College. And
that's in Melbourne for the
in Melbourne,
audience.
Yes. And I'd done teaching rounds at Hampton Primary School in Bayside, Melbourne beforehand, and had 6 weeks in Spotswood and then moved to Hampton, which is only a few kilometres from where we live. So that was fantastic instead of having to go the other side of town. And by that stage, I was engaged and ended up only teaching for about a year before we decided to have a child. I thought it would take me longer to get pregnant than it did. So I then went on to family leave, and I didn't go back to teaching until my two children, were 7 and 5, and my 5-year-old came to Elsternwick Primary School with me. And I taught there for 8 years. I had grade 1 and absolutely loved it, but I had a husband who was travelling constantly interstate, a very different sort of life now. And I did find that it was just too much of a juggle to be full-time. So I did drop down to 4 days. Prior to getting the job at Elsternwick, I had been doing emergency teaching there for about a year. And so, yeah.
And how long did you teach for?
I taught for 8 years full-time and then a couple of years emergency teaching, and then decided not to. But the interesting thing is that I've taken the skills that I developed through all that time, and I now actually teach business owners how to network and how to connect. So the teaching skills have always played a big part. And when I was teaching my dolls as a child, I never believed I would be teaching adults how to build business.
Nice. So was there a tipping point or something that caused you to leave, that made you decide to get out?
I think the first one was that I got pneumonia, and I was in bed for 5 weeks. And I was looking at my life thinking, do I live to work or do I work to live? And something's got to give. This is just not being fair. My children told me I was such a nice mother once I stopped teaching, because we'd have all that sort of pressure to get to get dressed and get to school and be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd be lovely to everybody else's children. Then I'd be screaming banshee at my own. So I think it was just a realignment for me as to what really mattered. And the good thing was that I'd always wanted to teach, always. And I didn't want to die wondering. So when I did go into teaching, I absolutely loved it. But the meetings and the reports and all those pressures were taking away from my own family.
So was there fear around making that decision to leave?
In a sense, I felt like I was almost given a little push, because I wanted to. I originally dropped down to 4 days a week. And then was told when it came to the end of the year that there wouldn't be any 4-day roles going forward. And it didn't occur to me to try and look for a 4-day position somewhere else. And so I left. And so, I probably didn't take all the steps I could have to have perhaps found a 0.8 or another 0.8 or a 0.5 job somewhere else. But also I have a temperament that likes to do lots of things differently and creatively. And I think I would have been probably happier in the art room than in a classroom, because I did find the structure of, doing certain things at certain times of the day, there was a bit of a clash with my personality type.
Well, you have to do that in the art room too, from my experience.
True. But I do love to, I love all that art and painting and the creative side of things. So,
Okay, so you moved out of education. How old was your family at that stage?
At that stage, my son was 15 and my daughter was 12.
Okay, and so then what did you do after that?
I got a job with Toll Transitions, and I was helping families relocate into Melbourne. So they're executive families, and I helped them find schools, did a lot of school inspection tours. They would give a brief of where they might like to live, what their budgets were, what sort of schooling that they wanted. I'd make appointments at schools that matched their needs and the area that they wanted to live in, and help them settle into Melbourne. I loved that job. It was used all my skills that I have a great love of people, and so listening to why they do and the lives they lived was fascinating, and helping them pick the right school and make decisions about moving to a new city and all the things that they needed. Perhaps also having been a travel agent, that's what I mean about looking back, because I was really planning itineraries for them to learn to navigate Melbourne. So.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a really fascinating job. So Toll, is that like a big trucking company?
Yes. So that was part of Toll Logistics, and so they had contracts with large companies that were bringing out executives, and then they would do the freight for the in fact, one family had moved from Italy into Melbourne, and they brought their kitchen with them, because you actually have, when you have an apartment in Italy, the plumbing's there, but you have to put your fittings in. So we actually have their kitchen now in our beach house at Phillip Island, because they didn't need it when they got here, because their house had a kitchen, and so their kitchen came out of storage and they gave it to us. So just learning things like that from people, was fascinating.
How funny. Like, I can't imagine that, going into a house with just the pipes.
Exactly. And it was basically, we would call it an IKEA kitchen, but they thought they had room in their container, so they might as well bring it with them.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
So there's lots of ways to live your life and lots of things to learn.
Amazing. So tell us about what life looks like for you now. What's a day in the life of Kerryn, and what's your purpose behind what you do?
My purpose behind what I do is that we have one life to live, and we can make an impact on the lives of other people. And I think the teaching thing, once again, it shines through. So I run a business community, and running a business is challenging, and people can have technical experience, but they also need to have knowledge. So we run events twice a month that bring business owners together to network, but there's always an educational component. When I was teaching, and I've only realised this recently, that I used to run a program that was called Gifted and Talented, and I would bring in people to talk to the kids about different aspects of their life. Now we have a speaker at every event who's sharing their knowledge on writing blogs, to putting ads on Facebook, to Google Analytics, whatever. And so they're gifted and talented people who are sharing their knowledge. So we're still learning, growing and achieving together. And on Tuesday night, I actually ran an event where we had 5 speakers, and the topic was why influence and change matters. So 5 business owners had to speak for 5 minutes, and one spoke on leadership, why that mattered. One spoke on pro bono work. She's an accountant. One spoke on Just Peoples, which is an organisation that connects businesses with organisations in Africa that need money. One spoke on productivity and mindset, and we had judges. And so then the conversation throughout the night was on that topic, and just expanding people's minds and their thinking. So I'm about impact, to get people to think beyond themselves and how they can create change and give to other people and help them, not about what's in it for you, although you get so much out of helping other people, as teachers do. So there's such an overlap that I am a teacher.
Yeah. Wow. And it sounds like a great community that you've created. How many people are in that community?
You have 28 members. Some of them have been with us for the 8 years, and we're still growing. And some people, you don't have to be a member to be with us, but the camaraderie between people is fabulous, because they talk about their challenges. So, that generates business, but it's also just constantly learning by being prompted by other people. We had a session that was about what makes a business thrive, and everybody spoke for 3 minutes about what it was, and the diversity between, never does it really come down to the money side, but the sort of the intellect side about, I don't want a business with lots of responsibility. I'm quite happy just with a small group and being able to have balance, or I want to scale and have 5 staff because I want to be able to travel, or so it's really healthy to help you work out your values and what's important to you.
Awesome. And so did you have to do any training or study, or how did you get into this, what you're doing now?
Because I think my love of people, because when I started my business, I started going to networking events to learn, and the ones that I enjoyed the most were where I did come away feeling like I'd learned something. But I also had found that some of the other structures were just so stiff that they didn't suit my personality. So I decided I could do it better, and I would start my own events. So that's how we started, and we actually started running speed networking events, and I designed a particular style where people talked for 6 minutes, not just your 1 minute each. And we did that for about 18 months. And then I realised that people weren't really having conversation. They were still just selling at each other and not really building that relationship. For example, the thing the other night, you might meet that accountant at an event But when you actually get deeper into the conversation, and the reason she talked about pro bono work is she'd survived breast cancer. And she was only 33 when she had that experience in her life. And so people make assumptions when they meet others. And so being able to have a deeper conversation, understand what makes people tick is really important. So now I've designed some tools and strategies, which I think comes back to being a teacher again, and having a bit of a creative bent. And when we have live events, we play cards. And I've designed a set of cards that get you to talk about your business.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so now we're moving them online. And, so I think the teaching part of me is creative and trying to work out a way to connect people, to make learning a bit of fun, to help break down the barriers, and to so I suppose the teaching part has played a big part in my training for what I do now. But at the time, I never really, as I said, never thought that I'd be teaching adults.
Yeah, wow. So just go back a step, because the listeners to this podcast are mainly teachers, and they've sat in professional development, trainings and things like that, but maybe they don't, or they haven't been to a networking event in what you're talking about. Can you just tell us a little bit about what normally would happen in an event like that?
Right. So there's all sorts of networking events, and you can find networking events for your particular area of interest. So I would say the community I run attracts people who are running a business or not-for-profit organisations that are wanting to grow, but there are, I'm sure, networks for teachers. In fact, I spoke at the Bastow Institute year before last about how important a network is for teachers to be able to see the connections and the ripple effect. So, being at the Gifted and Talented program I ran, a lot of the speakers were the parents of people within the community. And so at a networking event, it's about being interested and curious about other people. And as my husband would say, it's about listening loudly. So asking questions, not talking. My book is 2 ears, 1 mouth and a big heart, conversations and connections to amplify and inspire. And I share sort of my story about how I've got into business, but also the people that I've met along the way and the things that I've learned. And one thing that I've learned is teachers undervalue how much value they have. And I've had friends who are like, I could always just have to stay in teaching. And it's like, but you've got such good organisational skills. You've got such strong people skills. You've got, so many things open. So when you go to a networking event, you might be in a room of strangers, and a lot of people find that uncomfortable. So my tip for that is take on the persona of the host, take the emphasis off yourself. And the same, I do this, even in a social setting, because even though I run events, I'm actually happier being the host than sometimes being so just go forward and realise that if I ask, do you like networking, 50% of the room will sit down. That they don't. So you're not the only person who finds it a bit of a struggle. So if you go to a teaching conference, recognise that you're not the only one who's cautious about going to approach somebody new, but recognise that that person might have something so important. And I guarantee the number of times I end up sitting next to someone and it's just meant to be. There is a reason that, like me meeting you, Elizabeth, there's just a reason that something happens. It's magic. And you just have to be interested enough to, or, feel the fear and start the conversation, and you'll be surprised. My son and daughter-in-law used a particular marriage celebrant because I ended up sitting next to her at a dinner, and they happened to have just got engaged. So, and they'd already found someone. So, but they changed. So, you just don't know who you're going to meet and when you're going to learn something from them that's relevant to you or someone else, because you're like a conduit. You're there for other people as well. And if you have
really open,
very open, having an open mind, not making assumptions. Don't assume someone won't talk to you because they're on a different level. Don't assume that you won't talk to that person because they don't look like someone that you'd want to talk to. Don't make assumptions, because everybody has got something that you can learn from when you're open.
Okay, so I've got a quick question for you then. How do you actually make money in your business? Because it sounds like you're just having like a big party every day.
Oh, sorry. So we have a subscription membership model. So and we charge for the tickets. So and then I have programs, and my husband is a business strategist and mentor. So he works with our members as well. My philosophy is not to build, I don't want to build a 10x business. That's not my success is for other people, but I want to build a profitable business so that I can still keep helping other people. And in fact, we've just launched a program called YTM Ripple, which is a grants program for us to help not-for-profits and business owners in our community who might need some assistance.
Right. So it's actually providing grants. Is that right?
Just starting, right. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That sounds exciting. Well, after we get off this call, there's some other people I need to put you in touch with then. All right. Okay. So if you were approached by a teacher who's feeling stuck, like you described before, who feels like they can only stay in education, they've got nothing else to offer, what would you say to that? Someone's feeling stuck.
I would say get out a piece of paper and write yourself a brag sheet, a private brag sheet of all the things that you can do. What skills have you got that someone else would benefit from? What opportunities have you had or are you looking for? And I would just do a brain dump and think about, be able to look at what you've got. In fact, in my book, I say about my book is for people in business and not business, and there are action and prompts all the way through the book asking you to reflect on what matters to you and what value. And for me, it's making a difference. When I left teaching, I was given a morning tea by the Parents Association,
right.
And the president gave me a starfish, and you probably know the story about the starfish. Do you know the story about starfish?
No, I don't. You'll have to share it with us.
Okay. So it's just so close to my heart. So there was a child on the beach, and a man was walking along, and there'd been a big storm, and the beach was covered in starfish. And this man saw the child walking along and picking up the starfish and throwing them back into the water. And the man went up to the child and said, what are you doing? He said, I'm throwing the starfish back into the water. He said, but there's hundreds of them here, and you're never going to be able to pick them all back. And he said, yes, but it's going to make a difference to this one. And so my thing is, if you can make a difference to one person, then that can make a difference. And in fact, there's a story in my book about someone that came to a networking event, and he'd never been to a networking event ever before. And he came in very nervous, very shy, had a lot to talk about, was very interested, and we only were a small group that night, so he felt quite comfortable. And at the end of my book, and actually at this time that I was writing it, he wrote me a letter saying that I'd changed his life, because now he liked networking and he liked meeting people, and he'd started even to write a book. And so for me, that's a success. So when you ask me about my business, it's about that one person who's now gone on to help other people. So that ripple.
Nice. Yeah. I was listening to the Dent podcast this morning, actually, and he's talking about those big ocean liners. How do you move the rudder? And it's almost impossible because of the water pressure. But there's I don't know anything about boating, but there's a little rudder that's attached to the big rudder, and they move that, and that's enough to allow the big rudder then to move.
Yeah.
So they just move the small rudder that's kind of embedded in the big rudder. And that's enough to make that 1% shift is enough to allow the big rudder to move. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that you just have this small impact and then the ripple effect that follows on from that.
Absolutely. And as you go back to, this person or this teacher who's thinking about moving out, Think about what it is. I have, in fact, I mentioned her to you the other day. I have a friend who'd been teaching for 20 years in the art room and decided to do a master's in art therapy. And now she says that she's found her purpose. So, she's so much happier working in art therapy than she was in a classroom, although she was a sensational teacher. So if you do your brag sheet and think about where your strengths are and who could benefit from your strength, you might just be like me and start helping businesses to be better leaders. You don't have to stay. The skills you've got are transferable. And whether that's in corporate world or whatever, and I think we undervalue the skills that we have.
Yeah.
Because it's come so naturally to us, we don't realise that no one else knows how to do that or stumbles over that thing.
Yeah, or that's right. They find it agonising, and so they don't want to do it. And we're like, but that's easy. That's the easy part. But it isn't for everyone. So
no, and one of my strengths is making people feel comfortable and being able to start a conversation. And I think that comes from the teaching, but also from the relocation days, because when I'd pick that family up in the car and I'd spend a week with them, they knew nobody else but me, and I had to keep them talking in the car, making them feel comfortable, helping them answer their questions. And often I became like a lifeline. And, teachers are very good at reading emotions and connecting with people.
Yeah,
I believe. And, you have that child that comes into your classroom that is petrified or has moved from another state or whatever. And I think I create that environment in my community. So, someone comes in feeling very nervous and uncomfortable, but very quickly I believe I can help them settle in and move on. And in fact, with this awards thing that we ran, part of that came about by helping people step up and public speak to a room of people when they've never done it before. And we've had a couple of people that have won People's Choice and the main award, and they've never used a PowerPoint or spoken to a room of 40 people. And in fact, one of the judges the other night said that he was in the event in 2016. He now has a podcast. He's a landscape designer, very talented bloke, but he said it actually did help launch him into where he is now. Right. By taking that first step. So teachers can do that. They can help people to take a first step.
I love that idea too. It's really inspiring and motivating, isn't it, to think that you're being that, like you are, the catalyst of change.
It is. I love it, and I love it, and I feel so. I have that proud mother moment about they've done it. That's just that little push they needed. So yeah.
Okay, so if someone wanted to work with you or use your service, what would they need to do to find you?
Sure, I have a website, which is Kerryn Powell, KERRYN-Powell, or the Network Catalyst also. And I do mentoring. I do have an online course, which is about how to start or improve your networking. And it's basically in the beginning, it talks about all the networks you have in your life that you perhaps don't realise that you could tap into if you wanted to change your role. Your network is broad. It's your alumni, it's the people you went to school with, it's the family and friends that you have, it's all your professional contacts. So my website, they can book a discovery call and have a chat with me about what could be. And if it's that they are thinking they'd like to start a business, the first business I had was embroidering baby blankets at a craft market. And I went on and built a craft market, and we had 110 stalls. So I suppose, as I say, the connecting back, now I have a community of business owners, but really they're all got their little businesses, just like my art and craft market community did. And there's strength in community.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, and so a couple of final questions.
Sure.
What's the legacy that you want to leave in the world?
I want people to think beyond themselves, to recognise that anything's possible with a supportive network. And if everybody got on board now, we wouldn't be locked down. If everybody was supporting each other and not just thinking about what they want, then that would help. And also inequality and partnerships means a lot to me. So there shouldn't be inequality, whether that's education or gender. We need to work together to do what we can to make an impact on that first person, because that can create that ripple.
All right. And to wrap it up, what's your favourite song?
I Am Woman, Helen Reddy, because anything, we can just take the opportunity and push forward and don't let it stop. I never want to die thinking I regret that I didn't give that a go. If only I had. Because give it a go. You can always go back. You can always change. People often are looking for teachers to tutor or whatever. But for me, I didn't want to think, if only I'd been a teacher, my life would be different. And I know that after the 8 years that I had, I loved it. But I'm also glad I didn't teach for 30 years, because I've had so many other opportunities and met so many great, amazing people that I would never have met this family from Italy who gave me a kitchen, but also that she's a genetic scientist creating mice so that research could be done for cancer. I didn't even know that sort of thing existed. It just wasn't in my realm. And so my whole horizon has expanded.
Well, Kerryn Powell, thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope I haven't just talked too much.
No, it's been perfect.
Thank you. Listen loudly.
That's it. You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises, with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Do you know someone else who could benefit from hearing more stories of hope and transition from teachers all around the world? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app. Each share helps me reach listeners just like you who can benefit from this content. The Get Out of Teaching podcast is proud to be part of the Experts on Air podcast network. For show notes and other resources, please visit larksong.com.au/podcast.